And what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Designated Players and MLS podcast. Today, we come back on to talk about the worst PR week in MLS since, well, the last one. We came on here in December and we chatted about US Open Cup drama. And a month after US Soccer stepped in and struck it down, we're back talking about it again. Add on to that pro referee strike and the replacement refs in the league. We've got a lot of really bad looks on MLS from the soccer diehard perspective, I think is really where it's coming from. But the question really is, do the casuals care? Do the people outside of MLS care? And maybe a bigger question that we'll dive into is Don Garber's time at MLS coming to an end? We'll chat about all that and more this week with the Designated Players. Do a little break to put some music in there. Right? I think that's a good intro. And then I say, what's up, everybody? Thanks for joining us. I'm here with my
You don't
buddy
need to
Connor.
create your own break. I will make the break for it.
I'm just helping you out. I was going to introduce Connor all nice and say, hey, I got a good co-host, but now he interrupted me when I was trying to do that. So I've got this weird kid with an orange scarf. Hi, Connor.
This weird kid. First of all, does this look orange to you?
I can see the orange. I know everybody else can see the orange too.
It's yeah. Let me know, audio listeners. Can you see the orange?
All right. Enough out of you, Mr. Smart Guy. Say hello to the people.
Hello to the people.
Nice. We are here. We're chatting a lot of heavy topics today, I think is kind of the theme of this. But before we do that, we'll keep it light, we'll keep it sweet, we'll chat scarves. What do you got today?
All right. Well, if we're talking U.S. Open Cup, I'm gonna go with the last U.S. Open Cup winners, and that would be Houston Dynamo, potentially the last ever winner of the, I'll call it, legitimate US Open Cup with all this garbage going around with the cup. So who knows? Maybe this could be a legacy for Houston.
I like it. I was about to grab a scarf that represented the last non MLS team to make the final, but I wasn't sure if that would get us in hot water or not. So instead, I brought out our good old pink flamingos, our friends at Forward Madison. Episode 11. It's like 200 episodes ago, over 200
Episode
episodes.
11. Damn.
Yeah. But I like this scarf. I don't get enough time to bring it out and rep it. So, this is as good as time as ever, I guess.
I'll have you know it was actually episode 10.
No kidding. Yeah.
Yeah, episode 10. Podcast goes full Mingo.
Yeah. It's one of our best episodes ever though. On I think it's got like the third most downloads, even though
Well, yeah, that's because it had the boost.
yeah, the majority of them are like fake. But we got a sleeping puppy in the background. We got a halo light over Connor's head, and we're talking. We'll start with the pro referee strike and the replacement refs. So I'm gonna go out, and you feel free to step in at any time and tell me if you are going to approach it differently. But I want to look at this in a way that's less about like what they're fighting for and what is going on like in that sort of aspect, because we don't have all that information, and I feel like that's kind of wrong, or I use the term injustice to talk about something that serious in nature without having all the facts. Like I don't want to speculate on anything and be like, oh, this is what it's going to be. I feel wrong about talking like about stuff like that. Because I know I don't have all the facts. So I don't want to go and speculate on something like that. But instead, I do think that it's important to talk about kind of what it means for the league itself and what it means for the league going forward. But did you approach it in the same way? I guess I'll go there first.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair point. Probably not worth talking on something if there's not enough facts there to talk about. It's like going about the Bruce Arena situation where, it's something you want to talk about, I feel like, but considering there's just a lack of so much information, or not that that's necessarily the case here, where it's like so much information that's lagging, but a lack of information kind of puts you at a pause on talking about it because, what's the point in speculating if you're not gonna have enough information to kind of properly talk about it?
Right. And there are things that you can speculate on, and it's like, okay, that's fine. It's it's fair game. But I feel like something like this, where it actually like affects the day in and day out lives of individuals, I think that's probably a step too far, at least for us. We won't go into there, but you know, I made a list here of everything that I could find that I know, like that went out, and this is what was said. And I'll kind of run through it here so people who may not be familiar with the situation can understand what's going. So before I get into any of that, I do want to, and again, I don't think you'll disagree with me on this, but please step in and say that if you do. Um, Anybody in any job has the absolute right to be paid what they are owed, right? Especially in professional sports, but they have every right to fight what they believe is right for themselves, and as a union, fight for the betterment of the workers in general, right? So, you know, reading some things about how they were getting paid and the way that they would be treated, nobody is arguing against their decision here. So, you know, I don't know if you disagree with that, but I would assume you don't.
No, I mean, in my opinion, I wholeheartedly agree with you. They should, stick together, fight together to get what they feel they deserve.
Yep, 100%. So definitely backing them and hoping that they can get a good deal worked out here. But let's kind of start with where we're at. So the first thing that was reported, that there was an offer made, and 95.8% of referees voted against this agreement. 2 days later, Don Garber comes out on MLS opening weekend and says that they came to this agreement and it was never actually taken back to the members properly. So this vote, they don't know what they're talking about. They don't know what they're trying to fight for. Then the head of PRSA, Peter Manikowski, comes on and starts talking about how the offer was too low and explained why it was rejected. You know, the no strike, no lockout deal. Garber did not know what they were asking for because he wasn't even there. That was the sticking point from the letter that I read from him, that Don Garber is out here complaining, we don't know what they're arguing for. Well, Don Garber wasn't even there. So then our good friend Mark Geiger, head of pro referees, comes back and makes his comments saying that there were inaccuracies in this letter written by Manikowski, saying that the agreement was made, including a 25% raise. There was some language used in the accusations that was incorrect, as well as some timing issues about when they said things were done. Then he turned it back on the PSRA, saying that they were authorizing a strike before the lockout was even suggested. It's a lot of finger pointing and a lot of he said, they said, you know, not quite clear of what's going on. And then the final thing that I was able to dig up was that Chris Penso, an MLS referee, partaking in this strike, has been accused of threatening MLS replacement officials, allegedly saying that they would be they would be reprimanded for engaging in this replacement work, and that he is kind of overseeing what they call third party work. So college games and calling up, replacements. Maybe I didn't really get a good description of that, but basically they were insinuating that the referees would not get other opportunities outside of it, basically blackballing them out of the referee community, which is illegal during a strike, from what I was reading. So right now, referees are striking all over the country, specifically outside of pro headquarters. They're upset that the games are still going on, and that's kind of where we're at. I know it was very vague. I don't have all the information. That's why I'm not trying to go in and nitpick all the stuff. I was just kind of giving you a gloss over where we've gotten to. There was an agreement. It came back. They said no. Everybody now is pointing out fingers of why it was said no. This is kind of where we're at, and they meet back up again on Wednesday, so 2 days after this is released. Connor, I want to ask you first. The way I'm approaching this is there are two things that this does first, and one of them is the quality of the league, right? So what have you seen, at least in the last 14 games that we've seen here as we record before the Galaxy game? What have you seen with these referees that have now stepped in, and has the quality dropped at all?
I mean, admittedly, I haven't seen probably a ton of the games this weekend. I got to see a lot of the Atlanta game, a little bit of LAFC Seattle, and a little bit of Red Bull Nashville, a little bit of Cincy. So, you know, I don't want to speak on every single game that happened this weekend, but I would say from the games that I saw, I mean, there were small things that I complained about, and I think you and I were talking about it offline, and The little things like moving the ball back on a lot of free kicks just kind of felt like it slowed the momentum of the game a little bit, but ultimately not something where I'd be like, oh, the game's gone because these referees are just absolutely butchering it, making them retake all these free kicks. And overall, in terms of like the big calls, I mean, I think they made the right calls. I could say from the Atlanta Columbus game, I think the VAR PK stuff that went on, they ultimately, I think, landed on the right call, but it just took way too long to get to that point. And you had the broadcast saying that like, oh, it's confirmed, like not a penalty, and then all of a sudden now like he's going over to the screen to look like that may not necessarily be on the referees. I don't know if that's a communication problem, but that looked a little bit sloppy, I would say. But ultimately, you got to the right decision. And I think that's the important thing at the end of the day. I mean, I think back to a lot of like, there are really famous missed ref calls from when the replacement refs came into the NFL. And I think that's what you would look to avoid here. Like, I don't think people who watch the NFL will ever forget I believe it was the Packers against somebody else. The touchdown call where the two referees had different signals and everybody was confused and they ultimately made like I think the blatantly wrong call and it looked really bad on the replacement refs and I think that's probably what you're looking to avoid here and I didn't get to see a lot of the seventh. I didn't get to see actually any of the 7:30 or 8:30 games yesterday. So I don't want to say for certain that nothing happened, but I also don't really remember seeing anything to that extent from the replacement refs. So I would say overall, I don't think the quality has like fallen off, or at least definitely not fallen off significantly.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I mean, one of the big things that keeps getting cited in reports, whether it be in newspapers or articles or whatever, is the MLS is threatening the quality of their games because they're not bringing these referees back. And I agree with you. I think the biggest thing that I'm seeing is that the VAR calls are taking way longer than they should, um, and that's just to make sure they get it right. Whether and I don't think there's been a ton. The only really bad call that I've seen was on Twitter, and it was in the Dallas game. It was like the 88th minute, and there was I don't know if the defender was down, off the field of play or if he was behind, but he was off the screen in this clip, and they played the striker through. I don't remember who it was, but they played the striker through. The referee flagged for offside, and then a second after the whistle blows, you see the guy running in to defend the ball. So they were in line with the third defender instead of the second to last defender. And it was a clearly the incorrect call. But in terms of like game changing decisions, I don't see a ton of them in this first week. Um, so I don't think that there's a massive drop in quality, but there is, as you mentioned, a massive increase in the scrutinization and the fear of the loss of control, which does kill the flow of the game, right? So I mentioned it to you over text today that there was a Red Bull play that the Frankie Amaya got into the back of one of their guys and really I think he was like half a foot away, barely made contact with him. Just put his hand on his back. Dude falls over. Referee blows for it. The ball rolled a foot and a half away. Dude stopped it, retook it quickly, and he brought it back and he pointed like right next to the thing. He's like, no, it has to be there. And that that's going to come with that trying to get people. I think the biggest issue that comes out of this quality wise is I read an article coming out of the Athletic that said of the 60 something referees that they brought in to replace for this week, 24 of them only received their basic referee license. So there are three levels of referee licenses in the United States. It's like I think they just call it the referee license. So is your first one, but it's basically the grassroots license. Anybody who's 13 years old or older can get that license. So you get basic, and then you get regional, which is kind of like high school and a little bit more competitive. And then you get your national, which is what these guys have, or they should have. And I think only about 10 or 11 of them, if I remember the article correctly, had the national license. So they were replaced with these, and you could tell that they were definitely not at the highest level. They had different mannerisms that probably came from the college game or other different, lower level pro games that you wouldn't see here in MLS, right? Like the guy at the Red Bull game today was extremely like poignant, I guess maybe might be the word, where he's coming over and every time that there's a call, he's trying to explain himself, you know, even if nobody's asking, like he's looking around telling people what he did. You don't need to do that. Just make the call and go, right? Um, but no, I don't think the quality has dropped significantly. So that means, the other thing that I think really kind of comes into this realm here is now what does this do for the perspective of the league, right? What are people looking into this league and doing? So I'll ask you, like, in terms of outside, not fans, but kind of just general people on the outside looking in. Actually, you can do either one first, and I'll build off of you. So you can either go with what are the what you think the fans are thinking as yourself, or what people outside of the league are kind of looking in from the outside thinking.
I got to imagine a lot of like the casual fans, even within the country, or just like other casual fans from outside of the country. I got to imagine they probably don't know the refs super well. Like you and I, we talk about the league every single week. We follow it very closely, and even then, like we only know maybe a handful of the names of the refs that are in charge. So I kind of struggle to see like how much a casual fan will notice the change in the referees, especially if they don't know who they are in the first place. Unless there were just like unless like in the coming weeks there are just drastically bad calls. And I we were talking about how like we don't think the quality in week one thus far has been a significant drop off. But I do want to say that I don't think that's a knock against the referees that are striking right now. I think, if you want, as much as we complain about the refs, and believe me, Andrew is the first to complain about a one Mark Geiger, but if you want the best for the league, it's the guys that are on strike. They are the best referees that not in the world. I'm not saying they're the best in the world, but in terms of what we have right now versus what we had last season, if you want the best, it's the ones that are on strike. So that's ultimately I think what the conclusion is going to come down to, and I don't necessarily think the replacement refs are going to come in and absolutely just stink it up every single game, and there's going to be missed calls left and right, and the entire quality of the league is going to get destroyed, and people are going to start thinking the league's an absolute joke. Like we've said it about many other things. People who hate the league are going to continue to hate the league and can use this as fire to be like, oh, like the quality of the league sucks so much and it just got even worse somehow. The people that support the league, I think, will support it, will support the situation however I guess they see fit. I mean, obviously you and I talked about it before, but I think we hope that they can get to a deal that is good for the referees that are holding out right now. Um, but yeah, I guess overall, I would think the casual fan probably doesn't see a huge change, but I think the more in depth, the more detailed fans, the MLS sickos, if you will, I think as the weeks go on, I feel like they'll be able to sense the change more.
Yeah, and I think really the fans on the inside are kind of in the same thing where, and I don't want this to be taken out of context, but you don't go to a game to watch the referee, right? So the only time that you recognize the referee is there is if he's done a poor job, um, or she, depends on who you have. But um, I don't think that the fans are recognizing a massive change. Now, I'm sure there is a good handful, and there are that are upset with the way it's being handled, and we're going to go into the last little segment here about what this means, not necessarily from a game perspective, but more of a public image, right? There are people who are upset with the way it's handled, but the majority of the people who are like, oh, I'm just gonna, I just texted my buddy here and he hasn't gotten back to me, but I would argue, or maybe not argue is the wrong word, but I would probably guess that if you were a casual fan who was like, oh, I got tickets to a home opener, I'm gonna go, and you showed up not reading anything about what went on this off season, you wouldn't know, and it wouldn't affect you, right? And I would agree with you on that. But from the outside perspective, and now we'll go kind of more into public image, right? there was a quote here by former MLS, I guess, employee, now a member of CBS Sports Golazo, Nigel Real Coker. And he basically put it very bluntly, saying, the word that he would use is embarrassing. It's not a great look from outside of America, right? In other countries where this sport is much higher up on the, you know, ladder, if you will, in terms of the sports world, the referees are protected, and they are made to be really respected figures, right? People want to be a part of there. That way it feeds down into the system, and people are always going to want to try and work the way out, whatever, right? But when the commissioner of your league is coming out and basically throwing all of these referees under the bus, it makes him a really easy public figure to point the finger and scream about how bad this is, right? And to a degree, that's Mark Geiger's, gosh, that's Don Garber's job, is to be the person people yell at, right? Because he works for the owners, and the owners makes it whatever. But very rarely, and you can correct me if you know something differently here, but I don't remember the last time there was a CBA for players, referees, whoever it may be, where this much information about it has gotten out into the public, right? Like, the fact that we know all the things that they were complaining about, bargaining for, and then everybody's going out and airing their dirty laundry like that. I don't remember that happening anywhere ever at all. And regardless of if it has or hasn't, if the highest figure in your organization is coming out and basically saying, hey, we made a deal and you turned it down, so now you're confusing us and it's your fault, it's not our fault, it paints this picture of Garber, MLS, Pro, whoever else you want to be the person to blame, as a bully, right? You're trying to push the little guy around to get what you want, and um, it's just a bad look, right? Again, that's one of the reasons why we're not diving into the specifics, because there might be a legal side of it that we don't know, or somebody's lied about some figure they put out. We don't know that. But from a point of view, from a fan who is watching this from the outside, it's just a bad look. And at the state of where MLS is right now, you can't afford to have a look like that. But that, do you see it? Do you think it's similar?
I mean, I'll always be on the side of the referees union in this case, considering every single team in the league has an owner that's worth billions, if not hundreds of millions. It's like, I know you could strike a deal to get these guys back and pay them properly. And, like you said, have them garner the respect that other referees around the world are getting. And quite frankly, I think it makes MLS look hard to work with, hard to deal with, whether that's companies looking to get advertising deals with them, whether it's the MLS Players Association who's going to have to, continuously come to agreements with them. I mean, I feel like I remember there being some potential issues even with the last Players Association meeting between them. And I can't remember the details of that exactly, but I mean, if it's just like continuously running into problems, and it's making it look like they're trying to take shortcuts in this case, and they should just, like, the league has grown exponentially over the last few years, like club valuations, like all these owners are super super wealthy, even if we have the salary cap and it doesn't necessarily look like it because they're not splashing $1 billion like Chelsea is. They have that level of money. Like, they have so much money. Maybe not to the billion level, but you know what I mean. They have a lot of money. They could afford to properly pay the referees to have them play for them. And I agree. I mean, I think it's a bad look on the league, regardless of the he said kind of back and forth that's going on. Like, I think you got to just pay your referees properly, and maybe make it not look like you're so difficult to work with. Because I feel like it'll look. I don't know if it's something to the point where it would like cause fans or players necessarily to be like, oh, I can't come and play in MLS because the league is like really strict with their deals and give every like all these organizations a hard time. But I just think from a lot of like fans' perspective and people's perspective, it's gonna sour the taste on it's gonna sour their view of MLS. I mean, I guess we'll see in the long run if that actually has an impact on the league or whether it has an impact on Garber's position, but I'll kind of, I guess, just leave it at that.
I think that is a perfect way to describe that, Connor, because I'm not out here saying, you know, for the appeal of public image, just roll over and give anybody anything they want, right? Like I understand that there is two sides to things, but if this community comes to you and says, "Hey, thank you for your offer. We told you the numbers were too low. We told you before you even made the offer." The biggest issue that really seems to be going on here is MLS and the litigator, or I don't actually know the proper word for it, but the person who makes the deal. MLS and the person, or pro and the person who makes the deal, shook hands and said, "Hey, this is a great deal." While PRSA sent somebody in saying, "Hey, this isn't a good deal. We're going to turn this down if you send it to us because it's not good. We don't like it. These were the outlines that we set, and I don't know exactly what they were. You are missing the ball on pretty much all of them. We're going to turn it down." So I think the middleman messed this up from what I'm reading. But again, I'm not going to speculate too much on it. But at the end of the day, if they come in and they say, "Hey, thanks for the offer, but your number's too low," and you say, "Hey, this is our final offer," and then they deny it, okay. Like that's okay. But that should be the end of it in terms of the publicity. It should go out to the media saying, "Hey, it got presented. The referees turned it down. There's going to be a strike happening." End of. But to let it go back out into the media and then make it, go out. So basically, to let the referees go out and say this one thing, and then you go out and push them back. It's a big guy, little guy PR stunt that never goes over well with the crew, the audience you're trying to attract. There were things that I was reading that an AR barely makes over minimum wage if you work out all the hours and stuff like that. They don't travel into, in no, I don't want to say chartered, but like for first class or a nicer thing than just. I don't fly a lot, so I don't know what the classes are. But
Economy, like just
economy,
economy,
yeah,
like yeah, like that's I think the generic like
yeah,
what
yeah.
most
So
people fly.
business class, or is business the middle one?
Yeah, I think that's like the step up from economy usually.
Okay.
And then like
Um,
first class is the best, obviously, I think.
yeah,
Well,
yeah. So
other than like a private plane, but
sure,
I
right?
doubt the AR is
But
getting a private plane to go to each
well,
of the
well,
games.
the referees in general, right, are you know that's basically what they were making. They were barely making over minimum wage. They were traveling to okay, okay hotels, flying economy, and again traveling across the country. Right, this isn't England, Italy, Spain, where you can just hop in a car, drive 30 minutes, and you've just passed 7 soccer stadiums that you could have refed at. Right, like this is the United States, where your trips are thousands of miles sometimes, and um, what basically the deal they tried to strike last minute was, "Hey, we'll keep talking about this, but sign this deal that says no strike, no lockout," which essentially means, "Hey, keep working for what you guys were working for before, and we'll strike a deal out and fix it at some other point." Which, of course, when you are making barely minimum wage, traveling the country and economy, and staying in 2-star hotels, is going to get turned down. So
Yeah.
they want them to work for the wages they worked for the last 5 years. And the thing that they're fighting against today, the only thing that they were really fighting against, they're like, "Oh, just forget about it and we'll figure it out later." Of course they're going to turn that down. Follow that last thing up with the biggest note that I got here, and it's from Matt Forrester, a former MLS referee. He went onto Twitter. He's now a litigation guy for insurance and businesses. I'm just reading his Twitter profile here. Um, MLS, you go through a cycle of, I guess a CBA every X number of years. You sign it for X number of years, right? This is the second time in the last 3 collective bargaining cycles for the referees that there's been a lockout. So this happened 10 years ago. I didn't have time to look into it and dive into the first one and how that all works. So I'm not going to, comment too much on it, but I really liked how you mentioned that MLS looks difficult to work with. If you're looking to be a referee and all you're asking for is something that isn't a minimum wage pay to be a professional league referee, and you're going into a league that's locking you out every other time you try and ask for that, that is a massive red flag to anybody saying, hey, I want to work with you, right? It makes it look bad for people wanting to work with the league. It makes it work bad for people wanting to invest in the league, like you mentioned. And when you keep talking about you wanting to be a top league by 2026 or 2027 is when we're all going to, you need to take steps forward. And this is a massive step backwards um, in that goal, right? So, massive misses for MLS here. I agree with you. I'm 100% on the referee's side. I think that they absolutely have the right to fight for what they're looking for, and again, whatever extra that may be, whatever they disagreed with. But it's poor on MLS to sign a $2.5 billion deal over 10 years with Apple TV, plus all of the money they're getting from expansion fees and all the money to do all this, and you can't pay your assistant referees more than $20. Like, that's really, really bad. And again, there are a lot of things that we will defend this league for to no end. But this is bad. This is a bad thing for them. And I'm not happy with it.
100%. Yeah, I agree. I didn't realize they were making basically minimum wage. I mean, that's outrageous. Like, no way, shape, or form should that be the deal on the table. And for them to just be like, oh, like, we'll just talk about it later. Like, just keep doing what you're doing. Like, what? Why would they accept that? Like, there's no reason for them to accept. You didn't give them any incentive. Like, that's a benefit for MLS, and there was nothing given in exchange. So, like, why? In what world would they accept that and be like, yeah, okay, we won't lock out and strike? And is the benefit that you like keep your job? Is that the benefit? Like, that's not a benefit. That's what the minimum should be, that they should keep their job. You should be paying them if you want them to not strike or hold out. Like, it seems
Right.
pretty simple to me, I feel like.
I'll read from the thread here, and like I said, I'm just going to give all the information that I'm reading. I don't know the truth behind it, but I assume, being that he was a referee, I trust this to be true. So 2013 was the first year in MLS that they had actual employment contracts. Every other year before that were just I guess contractor, right? Go in, we'll sign you for a game. You'll get paid this much money, kind of like they do, at AYSO leagues, right? The way I used to ref. Show up, sign up for 2 games. Here's $14, go home, right? The first referee salary in 2013 was $35,000 a year. And then they said under the recently expired CBA, the referee's base salary started at $50,000. So the assistant referees made between $16,000 and $21,000, and then you got a match fee. So every game that you played went, and you got an extra $1,300 or so for every game, right? The annual earnings for a full-time minimum wage worker is $15,080 at the current minimum wage of $17.25 an hour. So you're paying, or you were paying, your assistant referees between $16,000 and $21,000. So literally like 5 cents above. I don't know if my math is right there. I might have just messed that up, but pennies above the minimum wage for a professional referee. Right. And then you mentioned the travel and the time commitment and all these other things. He mentions that you flew, and then most of the time they didn't land you in the airport next to the hotel. So you got in a car and you drove another 2 hours in a rental car. Right. Like, all of these things, and all they're asking is, hey, pay us a little bit more so this is worth it. And they're just like, nah, I'm good. Like, that's just such a bad look, and it's unfair. It's I don't have the words to describe how bad that is. That's kind of the way I'm going to put that.
Yeah, especially considering the fact that I mean, I don't know what the source is, but this article says MLS had $587 million in sponsorship revenue last year, and yet your assistant referees are making pennies above minimum wage. That's insane. That's ridiculous.
Well,
But I
and
mean,
let's be
that's a
fair. Let's be
whole.
fair. fifty
Sorry,
thousand
go ahead.
dollars for a center referee is garbage too.
It is, yeah, 100%.
Like Like we're talking the ARs, and the ARs are getting shafted. Like, don't get me wrong, like they're getting shafted. But the center referee only making $50K a year with the incentives on top is bad. Now again, there were reports out there 25% raises. You know, I saw an Athletic article that said the first thing that they turned down was, you know, they were getting 100 to you know, or 75 to 125% raises for, you know, different referees and stuff like that. I don't know what any of that, you know, turns out to be. You know, they're all reported stuff. I don't know if it's true. We haven't seen what it is, but at the end of the day, right, in a league where you are already grasping at straws to try and survive in your own country's sports landscape, something like this is just, it's not needed. It's a really bad look, and it's really forget the look. It's bad. Like, cut look out of it. Like, this is not a good thing to do. Period. Like, you are a multi-billion-dollar company. Pay people what you owe them. Like, it's not hard. I think they asked, again, another thing that I was reading that I don't quite know what that, you know, what it turns out to be. But they were like, all we asked was a funding pot that cost less than $100,000 per team. So, you know, 3 million, if my numbers are right. Yeah. Like, just about like 3 million extra dollars to pay referees a little bit more, like whatever the pool of referees are. Not the contractors, just the people that are signed on, right? $3 million, quick math here, is 6%. No. Sorry. It's 0.6% of what Charlotte just, not Charlotte. No, yeah, Charlotte. What Charlotte just paid you to get in the league, right? 500? That about right?
I can't remember what the expansion fee was.
I forget which one it was. But there was a team that, oh, or was it San Diego? Was San Diego 500?
I'll look it up.
Yeah, regardless, right? Regardless of who it was, you just got a $500 million check from somebody, and they're asking, hey, can we have 3 million of it to pay people what they owe so they can live? No. That's wrong. That's bad. Like, big red flag, right? Definitely not good. So, again, all on the side of the referees here, hoping that they can come up and get the deal that they are owed. But from a league standpoint, right? We're an MLS podcast, not a referee podcast. From a league standpoint, it is bad. It doesn't give you good. It doesn't give you good attention. It doesn't give you good, you know, respect among other people. Like, it doesn't show you that you are somebody that people want to work with, like you mentioned. So, goodness me, what a nightmare that is. But again, and again, second time in 3 years is not an accident, right? Unless these guys are coming in and saying, I want $400 million per assistant referee to referee your games, right? Which is not the case, clearly, if you're paying them $21,000 a year at the most, right? They need to do better. Plain and simple, need to do better. All right, yeah. Here we go again. We'll take a break, take a nice deep breath, because we're going
to dunk on MLS some more.
Yep, here we go. I'm going to reiterate the point, and again, you can cut me off if you disagree with me. I do not support what MLS has done leaving the US Open Cup. As somebody who understands the meaning behind improving the bottom levels to bring them up as a whole, removing that becomes a big deal. As somebody who understands the history of football needing to be extended, right? I was thinking about this the other day. I heard a snippet of a podcast, and I'll talk to you about it after, because I don't want it recorded. But I heard a snippet of this podcast that basically was talking about how English soccer history and US soccer history are basically, you know, everybody says it's a 100-year head start, but really it's a 20-year head start, because they started in the 80s and we started in the 1900s, like started getting things rolling, right? The difference is that British history, British football history, or European history in the game of football in general is continuous, right? It started and it grew and it grew and it grew and it grew. Where in the United States, it started and then FIFA came in and slashed it. And then we had a 20-year period where it existed, but it wasn't at the professional level, so nobody cared, right? Then we get to the NASL days, and then it died because they overspent too much. And now we've got another 10-year period where it didn't exist. So we're chopped. Extended history versus choppy history are not the same thing. So if you want to grow the game, you need to continue it, not start chopping things up and putting pieces together. That's not how you grow this. That being said, and again, I'm sorry, let me throw it to you. Do you agree with me?
Oh, well, I mean, fully, but also the fact of the matter is that the US has four other sports, which are arguably the strongest leagues in the world, that I just don't think any other countries have that level of competition for the main sport in their country. Like, I think, England's probably got other sports that are popular as well, but like soccer is far and away the most popular. And it's like, there's no competition there. And that's the way with so many European countries. But in the US, we have the NFL, which is massively popular. You have the MLB, which is also very popular, has some of the best players from all around the entire world. Same thing with the NBA. The best players from all around the world come and play in the NBA. They come and play in the MLB. Nobody else really plays NFL, so that's just the Americans. But NHL might be more up for debate. I'm not going to say that all the best players come here because I don't know what's going on in like Russia and Scandinavia. I know they love their hockey there too, so I don't want to say anything that's going to get me in hot hockey water. But
Patrick will come after you.
yeah, but there's massive competition just within the sports world in the US. Like it's so much more difficult to grow the league faster here when there's so many other sports people can watch.
Yeah, and you can't take those times out to not grow it, right? And that's actually a really good transition because if you want to hear our original takes on this, right? We did a full hour-long episode on the original US Open Cup drama. And I didn't listen to it back, but looking over my notes when I was doing this, all of my points still stand. Like I don't look back and be like, oh yeah, I don't think anything I said in that episode I would reconsider to this day. So if you want to hear our thoughts on the original decision and what they're doing, please go listen to that episode. Um, you can dive in and listen to all of our thoughts on that because it goes a lot deeper than what we've been doing the last couple of or what we're going to do here. It dives deeper into that um, mindset. I will give you the episode number. That is episode 201. So you can go into episode 201. You can listen to our thoughts. You can go onto YouTube. We have clips about it. It's a lot more deep cutting. But in this section of this episode, of episode 2, what are we on? 233? Yeah, 233. Crazy.
Yeah.
Of episode 233, I want to dive into the nuances of this. So what it means long term, the role of both parties, so MLS and USL, the history of kind of what, where this precedent lies, and a little bit more stuff like that. It's going to be a difficult conversation. I think I'm going to say things people aren't going to be happy with, and I'm okay with that because I have different views on what this might mean. Um, so let's talk a little bit. Unless you have anything else you want to add here, I want to talk about where we're at and kind of what we got into. Yeah,
No.
this isn't as easy of a back and forth as our other episodes because it's kind of tough to share thoughts and then bring others in. So apologies for the choppiness of this one, but I hope we get through it. So MLS back in December said that they were going to put all of their next pro teams in to play in the US Open Cup. US Soccer bounced back and said, hey, thanks, but no thanks. See you in April. That went on for about a month, and everybody's like, okay, great. We solved the problem. MLS is going to play, screw them, right? Then MLS comes back and says, hey, by the way, we're only going to send 8 teams to the US Open Cup. And that's kind of where we're at right now. USL threatened for a long time, or not for a long time, for a short time, just to not play at all on the principle of the thing, which again, I'm not gonna dive too deep into it, but that's kind of what would have, I guess I'll say, poked a hole in the whole logic, right? MLS is leaving because it's not making enough money, and USL saying, oh, well, it's about the thing of the cup. And then MLS pulls out and they say, oh, we're not going to play anyway. Well, Is it about the cup then, or is it about the money? So I'm glad that they're going to stick around. If MLS was going to play, there were rumors that they would only play if they would get the revenue from the away games of lower league teams, which is absolutely absurd. And then USL decided that they are going to play. That's kind of where we're at. Where are you at now? I guess personally, anything change for you? Do you have any other thoughts?
So I think last episode, I feel like the conclusion was we didn't like it. We think that MLS is going about it in a really crappy way. But at the same time, we kind of understood why they made the decision they did. Like, if there was going to be a competition to cut out of the schedule, like Leagues Cup was a cash cow for them last year. Like, of course, they're not going to cut that off. Like, it's going to, like, US Open Cup was in the crosshairs 100%. Like, teams were already rotating a ton of players every time they played in it. I think we talked about some quotes which were talking about the quality, not just of like the broadcast, but also just the games in general that people were not happy about. So I like if there was going to be a competition for them to cut out of the schedule, like that was going to be the one. Like you weren't going to cut out Champions League, obviously. It was between them and Leagues Cup, and Leagues Cup was such a hit in the first year. Like a league that's as money hungry as this one, as we've talked about extensively this episode, like of course they're not going to cut the Leagues Cup out. With all that said, like again, I don't agree with how they're going about this, especially with the recent stuff they've been talking about. It's just even makes it them look even worse. I did want to mention one thing though that I feel like is kind of my like more recent thought process on this, but I feel like I've seen a lot of fan anger towards the Leagues Cup, and I get why that's the case because Leagues Cup comes around, and now all of a sudden the U.S. Open Cup is out. Like, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to kind of like put the pieces together. Like, okay, Leagues Cup came in, like that's the reason U.S. Open Cup is getting the boot. But I feel like the frustration should be aimed towards, and this is just my opinion, but I think it should be aimed towards the league and the way that the league does their financial rules because it's not absurd to have two cup competitions, Champions League and a full season. Like that's exactly what England does. England has the FA Cup, Carabao Cup, they have Champions League, Europa League, Conference League, and then they have their regular season. Like that's exactly what MLS is shaping up to be if they had all of these in place. The only difference is that MLS has all these financial restrictions, which make it so that they can't properly get depth in a team so that they can rotate properly and give guys rest so that they're not playing 70 games in a season. Like I don't think that's a ridiculous schedule to have all these competitions together, but you gotta like make it so that teams can actually properly spend their money, get the depth, and then actually try and be competitive in all these competitions. But they don't do that. And instead, I feel like people are putting their anger towards the Leagues Cup, which I mean, I personally wouldn't want to see the Leagues Cup go. I thought it was really fun last year. And, I think MLS fans have been every year we talk about the Champions League, we're like, okay, MLS has to start playing Champions League every year with no like match fitness because our season hasn't started. Okay, Leagues Cup's a great chance then. We get our chance against the Liga MX teams in mid-season form. Like I think it's a good competition. I'd like to see it be kept along with US Open Cup. In my opinion, the frustration should be towards the roster rules. And I think there needs to be more financial flexibility so that teams can build depth and try and be competitive in all these competitions and not just completely sack one off.
No, that's spot on, dude. Like I've put out this tweet 4 times now. Every time something like this pops up is like the answer to fix this was so easy. Allow either expanded rosters like in your own rules because US Open Cup allows it. Like the guys I follow who I've chatted about a couple of times with US Open Cup history tweeted out all the time like US Open Cup as a competition allows unlimited second team loans. Like if you are like LAFC at Monterey Bay, for example, full team of twos and Eldon Yakupovic, but full team, and there was nothing wrong with that. But MLS in its roster has like 4. Like you get 4 games where you can call them up and then that's it. Like that's an easy change. The expanding the rosters for like, spending depth and things like that's a little bit tougher. But to go out and say, hey, we are going to change this rule for you guys to say, hey, if you want to go after US Open Cup with your first team in every game, go right ahead. We're not going to stop you. If you do not want to and you want to rotate, we're going to let you rotate as many times as you want. You can call up players for short-term loans if you got injuries, like on a short game week, international break, whatever. Any time that you call somebody up for a US Open Cup game, it doesn't count. We're just going to let you do it. It's easy. Like it is so simple. Instead, you go out and you make this whole big fiasco about, look at me, I'm going to make this history-altering decision about leaving the biggest historical Open Cup, competition in the country, when all I had to do was say, hey, just call up the kids and you're good. It's so silly, but
It's funny
anyways,
because they
go ahead.
wanted to send the MLS Next Pro teams when they could have just done your decision, not made a big fiasco out of it. Teams could have just called up their next pro teams and then just put them in the US Open Cup under like the main branding, and then nothing would have changed. Like it wouldn't have been a bad look on the league then because they wouldn't have been like trying to get out of the competition. I mean, they could have just done that and avoided all of this back and forth garbage.
Well, it's that, and it's also don't force people not to play it. Like every time you ask and I don't know if this is Twitter just only posting the ones that fit their bill, but I assume it's not. Every time I see a clip of somebody asking a player during a press release how they feel about the Open Cup, they're all pissed about it. Like they all want to play. Now, again, I don't know if that's because they understand what social media is like and they know that if they go out and say, yeah, I'm happy not to be playing in it, that they're going to get roasted, or if they're being told to answer. Like, I don't know what that comes from, but there isn't anybody I've seen who's come out and been like, oh, this is pretty good. Like I'm happy that I don't have to play the extra 2 games a year that I would have ended up playing anyway. Because they enter in the 3rd round. They enter in the round of 32. So at most you get 5 games, maybe 6. I think my numbers might be off, but again, if you want to hear us go deep into that logic, we did that in episode 201. So go give that a listen if you want to do that. Then come on back. But I do want to kind of talk about historically. There is precedent to not have top division teams in your tournament. Multiple times in US Open Cup history, we've seen top leagues send either parts or none of their teams. So up until 2012, so through 2011, MLS only sent 8 teams. Granted, there were less teams involved and there was qualifying for it, so everybody was trying to play there, but they only picked 8 teams. NASL chose not to send any of their clubs ever for any year that they were in existence, for a variety of reasons. And I was on and again, I'm going to disclaimer this by saying it was a Reddit thread, so take the information what you will, but there was 19, 20, 25 comments saying that they didn't send them. They were worried about the playoffs being the main focus because it's American sports, fear of being upstaged by lower level clubs because everybody was still spending on the same level at that point. And then I can't confirm this, but there was a comment there that said between the 1940s and the 1990s, my guess is when MLS came around, there were no pro teams involved at all, right? Division One. I don't really know how they defined pro in that sense, but the idea that this cup still continued with a massive lack of first team top division participation. And then after I said all that, went through all that, I still think it's a stupid idea, like not to do this. It's not the best model of success. Again, as I just mentioned, as we were leading up to this, you don't build upon history and build upon the work that you've done over the last 30 years by chopping things up and putting something new in there, right? We're going to have this conversation as we go down a little bit. And I understand that US Open Cup is not the most well attended for a variety of reasons. Yes, you can point at MLS's inability to promote the thing. There are tons of reasons you can point to it. I'm not going to get into that. But at the end of the day, there are parts of this that you can't just pick in place. So it's not the best model for success. One, for MLS, by the way, and two, for the sport as a whole, right? We talk about how we want to thrive and be a top division. And we saw 8, 10, 12 signings from USL Championship this year into MLS, and that's great. And we want more of that. But that doesn't happen if we're not supporting them in some way, right? I'm not saying take your $500 million transfer fee or expansion fee and the $10 million this dude spent in 2013 and then just flip flop them because, that's the way everybody else does. I'm not saying. But this was the one way that we were able to say, if we go and travel to you and you sell out your stadium, the Riverhounds, for example, last season, great. Use those funds to do whatever you want to do, right? This, and I'm going to dive into that a little bit, but this is the first decision I've seen MLS make that is somewhat in line with this idea that MLS is trying to kill lower league soccer. There are tons of decisions that have been made where we're like, oh, they're trying to kill off USL. No, they're trying to better themselves. This one, with the way that they're going about it, feels not great.
Yeah, I feel like, well, that's to say the least. I mean, they're trying to take the revenue away, but I wonder how much a lower league team, and I'm sure there's probably numbers on this somewhere on Reddit, Twitter, wherever in an article, but I wonder how much the lower league teams benefit from playing these US Open Cup games against MLS teams. Like whether it's a revenue thing, whether it's like I guess a reputational thing, that might be hard to measure, but I guess from a revenue perspective, like how much are they getting from the couple of games they do get against MLS teams? Like that's kind of what I'm wondering. Like I'm sure there probably are better ways to support the lower leagues as opposed to just the US Open Cup. Again, I don't want that to seem like justification for what MLS is doing, but I do feel like there's probably better ways to support them. And again, other than Pro Rel, which we're not going to dive into that discussion. But again, I'm also not an expert here, so I don't have an answer at the moment, at least, as to what would be a better way to support them. I'm sure there are ideas out there as to better ways to support the lower leagues, but I mean, pulling out a U.S. Open Cup certainly is anything but supporting them. And then
That's the opposite, right?
Yeah,
There were decent ones as a start, right? First off, the transfers coming in is good, right? They're paying money, they're giving money to these clubs. Are they underselling them? Maybe. And I think they're probably, USL is getting to that point now where they've got players worth selling, and they're where MLS was 15 years ago, whereas like, oh, we got players we're going to sell, somebody wants them, but we got to let them go for cheap because we don't have our name on the map yet, right? USL is probably in that same boat, $1 million or under for their movements, right? There is this other idea as well. Like everybody's talking about the MLS to USLC, how much MLS pulling out matters, and this is where I was kind of going with the USL almost pulling out too would have been really bad, because as much as USL championship clubs wouldn't benefit off of the MLS ticket prices, I guess, for lack of a better term, USLC is the highest level that other people are going to play as well, right? Like you think about USL2 teams that make a run past a USL1 side, and they're now going up against the Riverhounds, and the Riverhounds travel out to friggin'
make up a city, Wilmington.
well, no, I know one. There's I think the Rough Riders are still technically USL2.
Okay,
So go out to Long Island Rough Riders, and now you're out here in Suffolk County, Long Island, and these guys are oh man, you get to sell the story of the Riverhounds or whatever. Well, this is the highest they're gonna get, right? Regardless of if MLS is in there. So there was this whole thing at play for a hot minute where it was like, are you sure it's about the cup and what it means? Or are you just out here throwing another fit because MLS is doing something you don't like? And again, I'm very happy that they chose not to pursue that path, because that would have killed the cup. If USL Championship and pulled USL and USL1 because MLS didn't do it, well then that's how you kill the cup. So I ask this question maybe to myself, but I'll also ask it to you because we're in a conversation here. If MLS isn't there, does the cup die? I don't think so, right? History has shown up it's more than capable of surviving without the help of the top division, unless it is so heavily leaning on the one league for this financial viability that it wouldn't be able to pay out the little bit that it does for these transportation reimbursements and whatever it does pay out after it takes its gate fees. It still survives, right? It'll still be there. You can still play the cup. You can have the argument about whether it's worth it, or I think you used the term like what was the term you used at the beginning? Houston got the last ever legitimate, I think was the term. Legitimate Open Cup. Was that the right word?
I don't think it
I don't
was
think
legitimate. It
no, I
was
don't think
like,
that's the right word.
yeah, I can't remember the word either.
Yeah, we'll have to go back and scrub it. But right, the significance of it, does it drop a little bit? Maybe. Um, we'll go into that a little bit more. But do you think MLS leaves, the cup dies?
I think in the short term, no, but I do think in the long term, I could definitely see it in that matter. 'Cause I mean, if MLS keeps growing at the way that they're growing, eventually you're just in a situation where if you're in the US, you're probably just watching MLS. And if MLS is not in the cup, I think it's just going to get probably less people to focus on it. The more like the big names and the exciting players start to come over to the US, I think it slowly draws people away from USL if they can't keep up. And maybe that's not at the fault of the US Open Cup. Maybe that's just a discussion on the difference or the gap, I should say, between USL Championship and MLS. But I mean, yeah, I could definitely see it in the long term becoming much more of an issue if they're not there.
Yeah. That's a really good point. I didn't really think long term. Everything's been kind of short sighted for me. But I agree with that. I think it's a long term issue versus a short term issue where you can go through it. I also think that it'll depend on what CONCACAF does with that CCC spot. So I've heard rumors that if MLS didn't play in it, then the Open Cup champion wouldn't be invited into the Champions Cup, which I think is ridiculous. Excuse me. Because that if that happens, then I agree. Then there's no reason to play it other than bragging rights about being the lowest, the lower tier champion, which England has a cup like that, and it's great because they've got teams with 100 years of history, and they love to say, hey, my club won something. The stadium I grew up from down the road is a champion. That's awesome, right? Don't think that would work so well here. But anyways, if they were able to keep that Champions Cup spot viable, right, where the winner still gets a spot in, I think that actually raises the intensity of the Open Cup without MLS, because now you've got teams that are much closer in I'll use the term finances, right? What they pay players and the competition level. It's all a lot closer than MLS to anything else, which is just, again, the difference between USL Championship and MLS is very, monetarily is similar to MLS to the Premier League, right? Like there's just such a massive gap of what you can afford to bring in. So if you are able to then say, okay, if you're a USL Championship side and you win the Open Cup, you're going to go play down in Motagua in Honduras, and you're going to go and do this travel if you can afford it. Again, I don't know if
I was just thinking that.
That would be the tough
that,
right? But again, that then makes that cup even more. I don't want to use the term important, but like it stresses it a little bit more for those lower clubs, because now you have something even bigger to play for with a better chance to get into this massive competition that you wouldn't really have the chance to get in without it, right?
I think the better question is, with the expanded CCL, why are there no USL teams in there at all? Like, period. Like, you can't tell me that some of the top teams in USL Championship are worse in quality than some of the teams that make it into CCL. Like you can't. Like there's they could definitely beat a number of teams that make it to CCL. I'm not saying they're getting far. I'm not saying they're, knocking down, like making some Cinderella run all the way to the finals or anything. Like I think they would be good to win. Like it would be a really impressive run if they were able to win like more than one round. But I can't. It's not like a situation like there's no pro rel. It's not like they're technically a league below MLS. Like you could look at the valuations and the reputation and all that, and like yes, you could say very easily that MLS is more valuable, more has like a stronger reputation, but it's not pro rel. Like why shouldn't USL Championship get spots in an expanded CCL? And
Yeah.
maybe the cup without MLS is the way, like you were saying. Like it definitely makes it way more meaningful because that puts so many more eyes on your team. I 100% agree. I think that would be much better for those teams to, like now they get to, face off against some new competition. Whereas like they don't get the opportunities that MLS gets with something like Leagues Cup, where they get to play against League MX teams.
Yeah, and that was kind of my big thing when I heard this news that USL was just going to pull teams from the principle of it. It's like I get it, but I don't, because if you really were worried about the growth, and I got to pick the right words here because I don't want it to sound like I'm, oh, these guys are ungrateful, right? I don't want to be like old man on yelling at a cloud here, but it's such a massive opportunity to grow the game at your level, grow the game at your area, right? If you can get in and play these international teams, maybe why would you turn that away? I don't know. But again, they haven't, which is great. I so I'm trying to figure out which way I want to go with this because I can take it two different ways and just want to see how I'll make it flow. I'm going to go to this point here, and I think this might be the difficult conversation, and I'm okay with having that, so that's okay. But I think the thing that a lot of people don't chat about, which they probably should, is what is the long-term impact of this, right? So it's been increasingly clear that the plan of action for MLS is to attract these fans that aren't necessarily soccer fans, right? We know that we've spoken about it a lot that if you are looking at the person who, and again, we'll use just as a generalization the Euro snobs, right? The people who think that the Premier League is the end all be all of soccer and nothing else matters except for Man City, Liverpool, Man United, Arsenal, Tottenham. That is not the person that you're looking to create a growing market in MLS, right? Because those people will always have an excuse as to why MLS is not as good as whatever they feel like watching. However, if you go and try and have a conversation with or try and convert somebody who maybe, let's say, is the football playing dad of a kid who is starting up soccer and really, really loves it and wants to go to a game, right? That is the person you're looking to. Somebody whose kid maybe is in like their AYSO league. They wanna watch soccer like their dad watches football in the NFL. Well, I play soccer. I want to watch whatever the local team is. And local being a relative term, right? You can watch England overseas, you can watch local here, right? But we're going to use local over here because that's something that you can physically, tangibly be at, right? Which atmosphere brings those people back? Is it a US Open Cup game with 1,500 fans against some third division opponent that's never going to play in MLS based on the current setup, that is probably playing a rotated lineup of kids you've never heard of? Or is it a leagues cut game in front of between 10,000 to maybe 30,000 depending on the stadium you're in? The atmosphere, with Liga MX fans that are around that live in the United States, this big spectacle, the performances, the works. which one does the average American football dad walk away from, or the kid at this point, right? Depending on how old they are, with a positive impression that makes him say, "Ah, oh, that was really fun. I'd actually come back and do that again," instead of, "See, I told you nobody likes soccer in the U.S." Because that's what we're fighting still. I don't think people recognize, like, on Twitter, we are a group of people who have grown up with this game. I can have conversation with people who've been playing for 30 years, who are having conversation with people who are still playing right now, who are having conversations where this is our game. We are growing up playing this game and it is our number one game. But we are still trying to attract. The majority of the people we're still trying to attract are people who think that soccer is for sissies, right? Which one changes the mindset? The one with nobody showing up until the last 8 teams are involved, or the one that from the start has packed out stadiums, impressive, strong players, right? From that perspective, the decision is clear. We know why they've done this, and it's a growth thing. So people are going to argue that this is going to kill lower leagues and the leagues are all. I don't disagree that it's going to hurt them, but it's not going to generate the buzz that you get when you have the one-off cup set and things like that. But is it gonna lower the cup in popularity? Maybe, but it was already relatively low to begin with, right? But when we look at this from a big point of view, really, really big, in terms of growing the game in the country, not that we can go and say, "Oh, look, we have all these." I've heard the term "soccer first families" all over Twitter. Soccer first families are soccer first families because they've already got a team. And to convince them, and I'll use down the Liga, and because we're talking Leagues Cup, right? The Liga MX teams make up the majority of these soccer first countries, right? Or families, excuse me. You will not convince anybody to give up their Liga MX side to go support their local MLS side. That's not how this whole soccer first thing works, right? That being said, if you can create something that people like from a younger age, right? The 10 to 17 range where, oh, you know what, this is really cool. The tickets are relatively cheap for the most part. I know that's a different conversation we need to have. That will continue to come back. Well, now you're growing the game locally, not just I like it, but I'm going to go support it and help it grow. US Open Cup, and again, for whatever reason you want to put on the reason why, lack of promotion from MLS, lack of meaning, because as we mentioned in our last time we talked about this, the fact that there hasn't been more than probably a handful of teams that have participated in, half of the 100+ years of Leagues Cup that have been happening right now. Maybe. What are we doing to grow the game? This is something that I can see hurting right now, but in the long term, we might come back and say it was the right decision because we are now more popular in America. And
Well,
I'll let you ask him. I'll let you answer that.
I will answer your question with a question. And I will say, if you gave the average person two options of games to go see, the USA versus the Bahamas or the USA versus Mexico, I think it's pretty clear which one they're going to want to go see. They want to see the USA versus Mexico game. The level of quality in that game is going to be much more competitive. The fan atmosphere is going to be much higher because there's going to be huge groups of rival fans. Like it's not really a question. Like there's going to be people that still go to the USA Bahamas game because maybe that's their one opportunity to see the US. I don't know, maybe they just they only want to see the US if they're going to win or something like that. But majority of people are going to want to go to the more competitive, fun atmosphere game. And in that case, that's going to be the Leagues Cup game. I mean, I don't think that's in question. I mean, the way that Leagues Cup blew up in the first year was, and a lot of that I think was the Messi effect, right? Like his first games here and his unbelievable run. And But I mean that's a huge impact. I mean that got the Leagues Cup in front of a lot of eyes. I mean, there's clips all over the place of different goals from Messi and different things from Messi, and it's you get the tags of Leagues Cup in there, and it gets people like, okay, like maybe they're not like tuning in right away to see Leagues Cup, but now it's like they know what Leagues Cup is, they've heard of it. I think that makes it more likely for people to go watch it because it's like, okay, I've heard of this thing before. This is the thing that Messi went and torched people up and looked amazing, and there were a lot of really cool moments from that tournament and stuff. And that's what they're going to want to see. I mean, it's the better atmosphere, like you said. I think the atmosphere against other Liga MX fans is going to be awesome. I think that could be really fun because they're so passionate. It could bring out the passion of the MLS fans, and two very passionate fan bases going against each other is really fun as long as they keep it respectful. But I mean that's definitely going to be way more fun. And that's not to say that there's not passionate USL Championship fans or USL one fans, but it's I don't think to the level that you will get for like Liga MX fans. I just think the level of passion and level of quality, like yeah, I mean Leagues Cup is what I think majority of the target audience that you're talking about would want to see instead. They're going to want to see that level as opposed to them playing against the Long Island Rough Riders.
Right. And from like, and I want to make it clear, like this isn't us defending the decision, right? Like we don't like this. Anybody who understands this game doesn't like it. But as we just pointed out, that the main point of this is not so much to please the people who, because again, some people make some points, right? Like the people who are screaming and yelling on Twitter have watched 3 Open Cup games in the last 4 years. Like that is a real person out there who is saying, I don't like this, even though I'm not a part of it, because precedent and history and the way other people do it, that's the way it should be here. And that's a fair approach. Like I am not out here trying to tell people they can't be like that. But when you're looking at tangible impact, tangible physical impact, right? There are USL clubs that have great support, great following, no question about it. The way that this is set up, and right or wrong, and we can have this discussion another day, but the way this is set up is to bring in people from the top down because Americans know good sports, right? If they really cared about the fight between the lower and the higher and this whole thing, the NBA wouldn't be any popular. We'd care about the European basketball, right? Because they do the same thing that the European Football League does. Why do people like the Premier League the most? Because it's got the most money, it's the best production value, it's got the best players. Like that's just it, right? So if we can create more of that, create more people. And again, we can go and talk about ways to improve upon the US Open Cup, right? Where we have just sat here and had a conversation between where it is, what it's going up against, and why people are choosing B instead of A. We're not going to sit here and spend another 4 hours trying to break down why or how we can fix that or how it should be fixed, right? Because there are lots of ways that it could be fixed. That being said, we don't really have the time to dive into that. It might be another episode, if people want to chat about it. Maybe we dive into it and look at different ways to do that. But the other thing that I'm seeing is this whole like cash grab conversation, right? Like Don Garber is leaving US Open Cup for Leagues Cup because it makes him more money and he doesn't care about history, only cares about money. He's made it very clear that this is a monetary thing as well. Like I don't buy the schedule congestion. Like I think that was I think it's a crappy cover up. I'm just going to be frank about it. I think it's one of those like, okay, maybe if I say this, people will buy into it and I'll no, it didn't work, right? I don't buy that because it's self-made and it had a very easy fix and he didn't do it, right? But what he has come out and he says that he doesn't want MLS to be the ones providing the majority of the financial back, right? He will be a part of the US Open Cup and he will back it with all of his MLS might, so long as it's not so long as he's not the only league taking a hit, basically is what he's saying. It's either we all take it or we don't take it, right? And that makes sense to me. MLS is already committing money to other things, whether it be growing stadiums or growing, you know, youth divisions or heck, playing in other tournaments, prepping other tournaments, right? If you're invited to this and the USSF is funding it instead of taking some cuts off of teams' back, because I think USSF, and I use that's the old term, it's US Soccer now, but I believe they take like a flat fee of whatever you make at the gate, and whatever's left is yours. Basically, is to my understanding, and I might be wrong about that. But that's a cutoff of the backs because they don't get the fan support they could. And again, this could be, this is highly on MLS not being able to promote the thing on its own, right? Which a whole nother conversation. I don't disagree with anybody saying that MLS put itself in this position. You're 100% correct, right? But there are lots of these people out here screaming about the term solidarity, right? Because it's in that little thing that all the pro rel people use, like promotion, relegation, solidarity, and there's another one in there that I can't be bothered to remember. But that's not how this works. Like, it would be great if this is how that works. I am 100% here for it. Everybody helping everybody. This is America. That's not how that works. You're not going to have Apple taking cuts off of its profits to go hand down to this up and coming new tech company. Like, this is not how it works. It would be great if it was, but it's not. But I don't think the answer is, hey, we're going to play, but you know how you want us to go on the road so that these other leagues can make money? Well, we're going to take 60% of whatever is left after the USSF takes their cut, and then the lower league can have what's left. That's the part that got me really upset about the way that they've gone about this. If they came out and said exactly what we've said this whole episode, right? Nobody shows up to US Open Cup. Maybe it's our fault. Sorry, whatever. Leagues Cup is great to bring new eyes to the sport, to bring new passion to the sport, whatever it may be. Leagues Cup is a better approach. I would have been fine. But to come back and say, yeah, okay, the only way we're going to do this is if we benefit from it first. That's the one that got me a little upset, right? And I mentioned this earlier, that there are tons of people who scream every day about MLS trying to kill USL and its friends. And I don't agree with that take, but this one is probably the closest that they will get to being correct. Because it doesn't, again, like the referee situation, it doesn't put us in a good light.
Yeah. I mean, definitely doesn't put them in a good light. But I get the comment that you're saying as well. Like, it's not, there's no pro rel, there's no like attachment between MLS and USL. Like, there's nothing really to it. Like, there's no responsibility for MLS to make sure that USL is doing well and growing. Like, that's USL's responsibility to make sure USL is doing well and growing. And I'm sure MLS doesn't make it easy because it's a hard competition to go up against. And I'm sure there's many other examples you can make in the other industry examples, like Google, for example, right? Like, if you're another company trying to do something that Google's in the space of, like, it's going to be really hard to be up and coming and growing. But to the point that you made, it's not Google's responsibility necessarily to be like, okay, let's give these other companies money so that they can try and come up and be competitive against us. So it's a tough situation. I feel like I think I'm in the exact same boat as you, where it could have been handled so much better and more understandably, but the way they've gone about it is just such a bad look on them and the league as a whole.
Yeah. And that kind of takes to this next point, is where does it go from here? Right. And I was thinking about this the other day. And this is probably the one that's going to get me the most heat and whatever, right? MLS made a comment that it is looking to expand their MLS Next Pro division, right? Like 70 teams or something crazy like that. It is feeling ever so much that MLS is looking to grow to a point where they can make their own pyramid. So by that I mean, they're going to go out and they're going to reach out to all their friends in USL and say, hey guys, we're looking to grow to 70, 80 teams, right? You can come and join us. We're going to give you, what we just, somebody just paid 500 million. We'll give you a 50 million buy-in. We're going to give you 90% off the price. You come in, join our third division, play for X amount of years, or they go into NISA, they go into, MPSL, wherever they want to go, right? But they'll offer it up to USL too and say, hey, this is what we're going to do by 2050. I don't know, pick a random year, right? We are going to separate this 80 team super league into 4 divisions, and we're going to have parachute payments, we're going to have solidarity, we're going to have cups, we're going to have everything that Europe looks like. We're going to do it, but we're going to do it inside of our own pyramid. Jump on board or get out, or try and survive, right? I don't like it at all. I can see it happening. Like, all the pieces are starting to fall into place. They've already made the announcement they're looking to grow. They've grabbed a couple of NISA teams at that level from, I believe it was Chattanooga, who's the newest independent expansion. They left, and I don't have this particularly like memorized, so let me look it up really quick. Chattanooga MLS MP. So, I clicked the wrong button. But they have other teams, Huntsville City. They've got, I believe one of them was Connecticut, maybe. There's a Connecticut one there. Yeah, I believe they came out of NISA. This Chattanooga team did, but basically, I think what's going to happen is they're going to go in and they're going to grab X amount of teams. And they're going to say, okay, great, because the whole thing that they're screaming about, right, is or when I say they, I mean the people who want us to be like Europe, is the Premier League makes so much money and then it flows down or it supposedly flows down the pyramid, and everybody gets a cut and they all can survive, right? It's a joint pyramid. Everybody's working together. Great, right? MLS would love to do that, but they want control over it. So they're going to do it in their own pyramid. And that's what's going to lead to this. I'll use the term that everybody uses. That's fine. The death of the USL pyramid. And that's why I think USL is starting to push for all of their other changes, because they see it too. So I think that's a terrible way to go about it. I hate it. We've got 2 things set up. Let's just put it together. Would be great. But I think that's where we're leading towards. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on it, because I might just be going down to crazy town. But
I feel like this may turn into a 2-hour episode.
it might. That's why I told you we cut the other 2 segments, because I knew we were going down.
Because I am of the opposite opinion of you. I don't see a problem with it. And the reason I feel that way is because I genuinely, like, I'm trying to think of other leagues that have this same situation. I'm trying to think of, like, is there another league in the United States for baseball that is competing against the MLB that's not associated with the MLB? Like, there's AAA, AA, single A, all that stuff and whatnot.
Where do the Ducks play?
I don't think that is MLB associated, but like, is that really competition? I don't like like the Ducks is basically semi-professional or
Minor
even like
league
amateur.
baseball team. They play in the Atlantic League of Professional Baseball. Go Ducks.
I don't know if that means they're in the MLB pyramid or not, but
It is an official MLB partner based in the Mid-Atlantic and Southeastern United States.
okay, so
I
then
don't think
it
it's
is
in the.
MLB. So it's an MLB partner, so it sounds like it's maybe its own league, but under the MLB umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at the NBA. I mean, the NFL is a little bit tougher because, I guess there's like what do they call it? Like arena football or something like that,
Hmm.
which I mean doesn't hold a candle to the NFL. These other leagues just don't have these USL championship equivalents that are like trying to build up their stature and compete against them. Like there's not another league in the US that's like on like trying to build up so that they can take on the NBA and like take over the NBA. I feel like it's the same thing even in other countries. Like you were saying, like you look at the English system, everything's in the EFL. Like there's I don't again, I'm not an English football expert. I'm sure there's other English leagues, but none of them are even remotely close to the EFL. Like every team that is any bit of relevance to anybody outside of England is in the EFL. They're part of that system, part of that pyramid, and it's managed by one organization. So I think eventually soccer in the US is going to get to that point as well, where it's just going to be like USL could still exist. I'm not saying USL is not going to exist, but I think the reality is that like all these different leagues and organizations are all going to kind of mesh into one overarching organization. And I mean, the way things are going right now, it seems like it's very likely it could be MLS. And I mean, it's that way for many other American sports. It's that way for many other foreign leagues. So I don't necessarily see it as an issue. How they go about it, that's another question. If they do it in a very like backhanded, scummy way, that's one thing. But I don't think them being the ones in charge of 99% of American football is necessarily like terrible.
That's why I like having you on the pod, Connor, because you took my point and you clarified it. Because I am in agreement with you that it's not a bad thing, but the way they go about it is what I'm worried about. And that's the thing that I wasn't able to put into words. And I appreciate you for that.
Wow.
The
I don't get that
Yes,
better. I don't get that
yeah, I
very
know.
often.
I got to make sure I let you know. Um, like if they go in and say, hey, we're going to buy up USL at some point and all your teams will take them under the umbrella, or we'll give you the choice and say, hey, we'll bring it in, whatever. Like they do it really open instead of hostile takeover. I'm actually cool with it. My worry and my expectation is it will be more hostile takeover than anything else. That being said, I was actually looking over a couple weeks ago, probably the big list that all the pro rel people like to post of these dead clubs, right? And I was trying to put a trend together. And pretty much every time a new league pops up, right? So we talk about NISA, we talk about NASL the second time, we talk about there are some other ones here called I think it's NAS, not NASL, NSL is this new one that they're trying to bring. Every time we pop up a new league somewhere, the amount of teams that die in that 5 year span goes to the roof. Why? Because people think they can just put something down and make it. How many different leagues are popping up every other year in England, in Italy, in Spain, in China, in India? Name whatever country you want. You don't just have these leagues popping up, earning based off of whatever the pro league standards are, earning this sanction of being a Division 2, a Division 1, whatever league, and then just saying, okay, cool, now we're here, now everybody's going to follow us. Because that's not how this works. We just talked about it. You can't just cut in and place something in and say, okay, now we've got history again. That's not how that works. So having the one overarching thing is not a bad thing. I'm just worried about the way they do it because we've already proven that lower league teams die all over the place. It's just the way it is. But it is my belief that if we did have this one overarching thing where from Division 1 all the way down Division 4, there was one person in control of it or one entity in control of it. And I don't believe US soccer is that entity because they're just not that good, right? There's a lot of things that can work in that area. If you have the one that oversees it all, who can then say, okay, we've got all of this money that we're pulling in from all this TV revenue and stuff. Here's how we're going to separate it out. The first division is going to get 70%. The second division is going to get 20%. The third division is going to get 10% or 5%, the second division or the fourth division getting 5%, right? Like they can control and really, really make sure that there's stability there, and then you can continue to grow. So I'm with you there, where it's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm more worried about the way that it happens than it actually happening. I just hope that it isn't like a whole cut everybody down and hostile takeover. We're gonna rule the world thing, because that'll take an extra decade and a half to go through instead. So that's
I'm
fun.
going I'm going to I'm going to implore you that we wrap up the conversation there, because I feel like we've been going for way longer than we originally anticipated, and
Yeah,
I want to watch Messi get me fantasy points.
I actually cut that last section because I thought it was going to be too long, and then I said, "Ah, screw it, let's talk about it."
No, no, it
So
was a good section to talk about. I'm glad we talked
yeah,
about it.
yeah,
I mean,
because
we
that's
could literally sit here and talk about this for multiple hours on end, but we don't have the allowance for that in our program, and not quite sure that many people outside of a few MLS sickos are going to want to listen to us talk about US Open Cup for 2 hours or 3 hours.
yeah, it'll be a good thing to clip up. I'm sure people will, if I put a good fun thumbnail on there, I'm sure people will get involved. But hey, if you made it this far, thanks for being here. We appreciate you. If you enjoyed what we did and you want to stick around for more, leave us a like and follow us wherever you get your podcast. And then follow us on all forms of social media too. So we're on Facebook, a lot less these days. I'm dialing back to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Twitter's where we're most active. YouTube's where we're second most active. TikTok is where we're third most active, and then that's pretty much it. Make sure you go follow us there and interact with our clips and give us your thoughts. This one's probably going to stir up some emotions, and that's okay. That's, we need to be able to have those conversations. So, hopefully with the power of editing, this wasn't too bad for you guys. We appreciate you being here. Yeah, I think that's it. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back again with either some history or some more news or some more games. We got a whole bunch of stuff coming up pretty soon. But I've been Andrew. That's Connor. We appreciate you being here, and we'll see you next time on the next episode of the Designated Players and MLS podcast. See ya.